Pioneer proud. All right, I deep teased this story. Doug, this is for you.
Okay.
2023 MLB Wild Card Era Franchise Rankings. This is from The Athletic, posted early this morning. Here is how they do it.
Okay.
He writes, Stephen Nesbitt. You know Steve Nesbitt?
No.
He says, as a true ball rider of the people.
Don't say that.
I love that.
He just anointed himself that he's the one speaking for the people.
The voice of the voiceless.
They're ranking teams from 1995 to the present. You get 9 points for winning the World Series.
Okay.
For winning a pennant, you get 6 points.
Pennant.
For losing in a championship series, you get 3 points. For losing in a division series, you get 2 points. For losing in the wild card, you get 1 point. He said, in addition, readers wanted to incentivize division titles and penalize prolonged non-competitiveness and tanking. So teams are now rewarded each time they win their division, plus 1 point, and docked when they lose at least 90 games in consecutive seasons, minus 1 point. Consider the first bad season a grace period. Lose 90-plus games 5 seasons in a row like the 2001 to 2005 Tigers, and that's minus 4 points total. Add up the point totals for each of the past 28 seasons from the shortened 1995 season through 2022 World Series, and you've got the updated franchise rankings. Doug, the worst franchise since 1995 is?
I guess I would go with that Detroit, or maybe, Seattle went forever without getting in the playoffs.
I can't. I don't have the time for you to go through
Detroit.
No, I'm sorry.
They went to a World Series.
Well, so did Kansas City, so they're probably out. Oakland?
No. When I say it, you're going to be kicking yourself, by the way.
Colorado or Miami for sure.
No.
Not Seattle?
Man.
No.
Can I have the initials, please?
PP.
Pittsburgh Pirates?
Yes!
See, that was easy. Don't make it so easy.
They're the only ones who are in the negative total.
Oh, God.
They have minus 4 points.
That's awful.
It's not been a great run.
The next team is 10 points away from them. And to give you an idea of how the point total works, the team that is number 1 in the wild card era, just to give you an idea, to show just how bad the Pirates have been, that is the only team, like I said, in negative points, and they're 10 points, which is the biggest gap between number 30 and 29. The second worst team, anybody want to fire a bullet? We're not going to do all 30 for the record. But
initials, please.
B-O.
Baltimore Orioles.
Yes!
We're experts at this.
That was easy.
Yeah.
Then you get to the Royals. Even though the Royals won a World Series and went to a World Series in 2014, won it in 2015. Otherwise, it's been a disaster. And then you see another friend from the National League Central, the Cincinnati Reds,
right.
27th. You'll see another friend from the National League Central. That'll be a theme in the early going. This one might surprise you. The Milwaukee Brewers, 24th.
Really?
How about that? That one kind of surprised me when I was reading
because
this
they've been
morning.
pretty good lately.
Milwaukee missed the playoffs this past fall for the first time in 5 years, but momentum still seems to be in their favor. The Brewers boast one of the best rotations in baseball, headlined by Corbin Burns and Brandon Woodruff. And adding William Contreras this winter strengthens a lineup that already was better last year than many realized. The Brewers checked in at number 8 on Law's latest farm system rankings, but overall since 1995, they have 14 points, which puts them in 24th place. Another friend from the National League Central makes an appearance in the bottom half, and that would be, of course, the Chicago Cubs. I'm sorry, the Chicago Cubs are 10th, not in the bottom half, 10th. And I'm surprised they're 10th, but they did have a run in the late aughts, and then, of course, the run in 15, 16, and 17. I don't know what they were around in 18 or not. But the Cubs are 10th. Now, the question, Doug.
Yeah.
The most successful franchises, give me the top 3 since 1995.
I would think it would be Boston, maybe Houston, and the Dodgers.
None of those are in the top 3.
Really?
Wow, really? Boston's not in the top 3?
Cardinals.
So then the Yankees, the Cardinals, and
Braves.
Giants.
You're firing good bets at the pot, but Ken Strode's the one who's correct. I mean, he's just nailing everything.
Really?
The Yankees are number one by a comfortable margin, by the way. But keep in mind, the Yankees, I'm sure if we were doing Francesa's show in New York, probably don't have a whole lot of equity in New York right now because they haven't won a World Series since 2009. But when you go back to 95, you have them dominating 96. They didn't get there in 97. I apologize in advance, Indians did, and they lost to the Marlins. But they were in the postseason. And then 98, 99, 2000, and they were a half inning away in 2001 from winning yet again. So they had that run and a 2009 World Series, and they're in the playoffs all the damn time. So the Yankees have a comfortable gap between them and the second place team, the Braves.
Really?
But again, a lot of that would be weighted toward the Braves winning the World Series in 95, getting to the World Series in 96. Eric Gregg had an intriguing strike zone when they played the Marlins in 1997.
A foot outside is a strike. If it's by one of the Braves' top pitchers, a foot outside is a strike.
Well, it was to the advantage of Levon Hernandez that particular afternoon. And 99, they were back in the World Series, and then they've won one since then as well. So I think that's where that comes from. Again, kind of like the Yankees, a lot of the late 1990s. So if you're younger, that might. And then number 3, the Cardinals. And they're right there with the Braves as far as the tops of the National League. I would have thought, honestly, I would have gone probably Yankees, Braves, Cardinals, Giants.
Red Sox have won 3 World Series, right?
Red Sox are 4th. But the Cardinals have a decent gap on them. 72 points for the Cardinals, 66 points for the Red Sox. Here's what they write about the Cardinals. Only 2 MLB teams have had no 90-loss season since 1995, the Cardinals and the Yankees. The Cardinals are a model of excellence and reliability in the National League. Since 2000, the Cardinals have had just 1 losing season, which was 2007, and have reached the playoffs 16 times. If you're a fan of the Brewers or Cubs or about 20 other teams, that's maddening consistency. St. Louis didn't add much this offseason, settling for one big deal to bring in Wilson Contreras to replace the retired Yadier Molina. But with an established roster and a top 10 farm system, they'll be all right. So the Cardinals in the last decade have 22 points, which puts them 5th in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, that seems about right to me. Plowsy, what do you think about the Cardinals being described as a model of excellence?
I mean, I hate what happened the last 6 years, but in terms of from 95 to now, I mean, it's obvious they're a top 5 franchise. I mean, I love to bash them, but they're right. No 90-loss seasons. You have, 2 World Series in that era?
2006, 2011,
2006,
lost in
2011.
2004 and 2013.
I hate from 2012 to now in the era that I absolutely cannot stand of Cardinal baseball. But no, like before that, I completely agree with the rankings. I cannot wait to see in the next 5 to 10 years when they do this to see where they stack up with a bunch of wild card one and dones and a bunch of low-hanging fruits.
Oh.
So, yeah, like that era is great.
Dodgers, Marlins, Brewers, Twins. I don't think they're very good. Phillies.
That's right.
Pittsburgh, 82.5, except that division with the Cubs. The Phillies weren't in it. If the Pirates weren't in with the Cubs, I think they're probably over in that division. I just worry about them and the Cardinals. The Cardinals, they put them at, 84.5? That's about right.
That's about right. But I absolutely cannot stand the Cardinal baseball from 2012 to now. That's my most annoying. I cannot stand it, man.
I feel differently. I feel the Cardinals give me everything I need in my team.
Doug, it's milk toast. If you want to just backdoor your way, you're in it. Okay.
Almost every game they play is meaningful. From the start of the season right down to the last game, they're all meaningful games.
Give me the Houston Astros model any day of the week
You want to be
instead
the worst
of
team in the league for 3 or 4 years?
Yes,
You do.
and then be dominant the next 10 to 12. 100%, Doug. Just floating along. Just it's not entertaining to me. I'm sorry. Not having aggressive off seasons.
Over merit badge.
Yeah. I think Strauss would hate this 10-year run too that the
Joe
Cardinals have been
Strauss
on.
is so missed.
Yes.
And the thing is, when Joe Strauss passed away, I knew he'd be missed. Because, again, he's a credible dissenter, A lot of people can dissent, but they might not be credible.
Yeah.
And then, plenty of people have credibility are scared to dissent. So that's why Strauss was so great. And he didn't give a damn, which also makes him, lethal. But I would, with regards to the Cardinals' consistency, when you observe that 3 of the teams ranked in the bottom 20 percentile are from the National League Central, 24, 27, and 30. I think that helps provide why Cardinal fans, I don't think, as weird as it might sound, would feel that the franchise since 1995 has been the 3rd best in baseball. Because while the point total is there, which is certainly boosted by division titles, that kind of consistency appearing in the postseason has been met with a lot of disappointment in the postseason. When you're there as often as they are to quote-unquote only get to 4 World Series, that isn't a great conversion rate. And then it would speak to the argument that they are in part, experiencing the appearances in the postseason because they're in a division with 2 woeful I mean, the Pittsburgh Pirates are another world. Pittsburgh Pirates, I think you could make a case. Jackson, you can provide the NBA context. Because everybody in the NFL in the last 15 years has been in the playoffs, unless I'm missing something. And I realize the NFL's got a bunch of people going to the playoffs. But the Pittsburgh Pirates, I think you can make a case for being the worst franchise in professional sports, the 4 major sports leagues in North America since 1995. So that's in your division. The Reds have been a dumpster fire as well. And I'm surprised to see the Brewers there at 24, honestly. And I'm surprised to see the Cubs as high as 10. But I think the handful of years where the Cardinals were kind of out of it, that's when the Cubs were in. And I'm talking about 07, 08. And then the Cubs had their run when the Cardinals were kind of flopping around in 16, 17, and 18. So maybe that's why it doesn't seem, because they weren't really doing battle like the Cardinals and Astros were.
Yeah.
You know
Pirates
what I mean?
haven't even had, since McCutcheon and even before, who's their most
They were a few
exciting
outs away
player?
from getting the Cardinals out in 2013, and
Yeah,
they blew
they
that
had a good
lead.
team back then.
They did, and the Cardinals came back in Game 4, and then they beat them in Game 5. Wainwright and Garrett Cole, if I'm not mistaken.
And then the Pirates just jettisoned their top players. We don't need these guys.
Well, they traded for Matt Morris, who was on his way to go to Montana and play FIFA the rest of his life, and couldn't have been more annoyed by having to go east. And then the Chris Archer thing, and I'm not doing this because Iggy has a thing with Chris Archer. It was a stunning trade with the Rays for what they gave up and for what Chris Archer was. I mean, they've just made these really strange deals. So it's kind of like how, I was alive in the 1980s, but I know fans of the Big Red, the St. Louis football Cardinals, would talk about the front office moves and go, what are they doing?
Oh, yeah.
That's
especially
what
with the draft.
Yeah. So anyway, when 3 of the bottom 6 teams in the rankings are in your division, that's telling you, that helps your cause. Meanwhile, the Yankees to be in the spot they're in, when you've got the Red Sox in there, speaks a lot when the Red Sox are there along with the Yankees. And, and while the Rays certainly aren't a blue blood team, somehow I feel like since they made that appearance in the World Series in 2008, they're always there, even though you probably can't name more than 5 players on the team.
Yeah.
And there aren't more than 5 people in that beautiful ballpark.
Well, St. Louis is a similar-sized market to some of these other teams that have really struggled, like Pittsburgh and Milwaukee and Cincinnati and Kansas City. Similar-sized market. We ought to be pretty happy that they found a way to be able to play with the big boys and to afford some of the best players in the game and the salaries that they command.
Play with the big boys.
Well, I think they do.
When?
Well, they have won a couple World Series in the last 20 years.
They didn't win the division last year.
Let me ask the plowmaster this.
The division was,
their playoff record in the last few years has been woeful.
Yeah, Doug, again, my point, thank you. Making the playoffs, to me, I'm just done with it. I'd
Why
rather
would you be done with
rebuild.
that? That's the whole purpose of the regular season.
But also, you're talking about, we avoided the bad contracts. We haven't. Brett Cecil, Andrew Miller. We have Mike Leake.
Every team's got those. Every team in
we just signed Steven Matz, who played 8 games last year. We have another pitcher coming off of injury. I'd rather just use all that money that we spent on 4 terrible players who are out off the roster in 3 years, and just overload and overpay Bryce Harper type player, which we should have, but we didn't. So that's why the Cardinals it's almost like they overthink and shoot themselves in the foot. I think you just got to go and be aggressive.
Well,
but they don't need to be, because you got 3 million nacho head eating dorks going every time, going to see Lars Nootbaar grinding a pepper shaker.
Well, the Cardinals are never going to have 3 players on their team all making $25 to $30 million a year. Never.
Well,
if you had Bryce
they almost
Harper
have that now, don't they?
Well, you got
Goldschmidt,
Arenado and Goldschmidt, who's the next closest.
Contreras, probably.
Yeah, Contreras is probably close to that.
25, 30 million?
Not 25 or 30. What do you get? 80 million over 4 years?
You got like 16 and a half, maybe. 15 and a half.
And they've had it. Molina made a ton of money. They had a bunch of guys right around 18 million or so.
Wow. That's not 25 or 30. I'm talking about these 10-year contracts for $300 million.
Bryce Harper contract would have worked out for the Cardinals. And just in terms of now you have a DH, look at what they're doing in Philly. I mean, he's just absolutely raking it.
Yeah.
So that one we should have done, and I'll stand by that.
Well, and just because you wanted him doesn't mean that the player wanted to come here.
Well, probably not for that. I'm sure Mozeliak gave a nice, tempting offer.
Apparently, they went heavy after
3 years, $35 million with the option of a 4th.
And Carlos Stanton, apparently they made a play for him. He said he just didn't want to play here.
And those are the ones we got lucky with.
Well, there's no guarantees with any of these contracts, that the Bryce Harpers or the Brett Cecils.
Well, they're guaranteed when you're signing Brett Cecil, Mike Leake, and Steven Matz that there's 100% disappointment going to happen. None of those, nobody was like, oh, man, we got Mike Leake. Let's give him $80 million. Yes. Like, nobody was excited about the contract that they shelled out for those guys.
Good morning.
Well, hindsight, of course, is 2020. Those turned out to be terrible signings for sure. But every team does that. Every team swings and misses sometimes. They all do. It's just part of it.
Yeah.
You don't buy that.
I'm just so sick of backdooring in the playoffs and just losing in the wild card. It's just so annoying. It's like, am I the only one that's annoyed by that?
Well,
I feel like I'm the only one.
If you win the division, that's not backdooring.
Oh my God! You see that division? Jesus, Doug, come on. We just talked about the Pirates. They have -4 points. I know what that means, absolutely nothing, but like...
Well, you can only play in the division where they put you, so...
You really only have to care about a third of, like, your division games, really. You can go in there with a hangover and beat the Pirates.
Now, that's changing this year, right? The schedule changed.
Right.
Where now they play...
It's a more balanced
I think they play everybody in baseball this year. And fewer division games.
And I like that.
Yeah, I do too. Just for the entertainment value. I like to see everybody. I don't need to see 18 games.
13 games against division rivals, 52 games overall against division opponents. Each team will play 6 games against 6 opponents and 7 games against 4 opponents in the same league for a total of 64 games.
Big fan.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
So that will most likely, barring somebody in the National League Central who is not projected to have a good year, having a good year, that will, quote-unquote, hurt a team like the Cardinals that is expected to have a good year. The thing that I would make, and I make this observation more often on 101 than I do here, but I'll bring it here, is nationally, John Mozeliak's approval rating is, because I would guess, Doug, I know this is totally arbitrary, but I would think his approval rating in St. Louis is around 40 to 50%. And nationally, amongst baseball writers and hardcore baseball fans, because the average person can't name the GM or president of baseball operations of most teams, would put it like at 80 to 90%.
Probably so, yeah.
And then the Cardinal approval rating over the last decade, locally, I think more people, I don't think they're necessarily as extreme as, say, the Plowhawks' opinion is, but haven't considered the last decade to be particularly successful. They were. If we're going the last decade, I don't know if we're going to start in 12 or 13. 12, they were a win away, beating Barry Zito away at home from going to yet another World Series. But if you just want to start in 13, they went to the World Series. 14 and LCS, really disappointing. That's one where a manager got them, and that was That was stunning what went on in the management of the 2014 NLCS, and really unfortunate because I think that team was good enough. In 2015, a 100-win team, but then you had these mediocre 16, 17, and 18 teams. 19 had some great pitching, but crap offense relative to the teams that would wind up advancing. They just got shut down by the Nationals. 2020 is whatever. And 2021, that was a month-ish of great baseball. If you recall, that was the winning streak year.
Yeah, right at the end.
And then 2022, I thought 2022 was a great year. I think 2022 was a great year. So I think if you're comparing it to a lot of teams in baseball, it would be on the top third. I think for Cardinal fans, however, I don't know if it necessarily feels that way. And I think that's perhaps because of what 16, 17, 18, and then the flameouts in the 19 NLCS. I don't even remember what happened in 2020. I don't know how many people even count 2020. You had the wild card beat to the Dodgers and then the sweep against the Phillies. So I think for what the standard is locally, I think many fans would say the last decade hasn't been great. And then I think nationally people would go, well, the Cardinals, they're always in it. And the Cardinals have been to an NLCS in 13, in 14, in 19, and they've been in the playoffs in, if you want to count 20, but 21 and 22. But that's a very wider net definition of the playoffs than even the first 10 years of this decade, much less if you want to go back to the playoff format of the 1990s or in 1980s before you had the wild card, where you were a series win away from going to the World Series. So it kind of gets closer to that 1980s NHL where 4 of the 5 teams in the Norris division would play a round robin and one team would be sitting out. And so that is why I understand where the Plowhawk is coming from with going the last decade has not been, I mean, I realize he's more passionate about it, but and then you look at the other teams in the division, and minus that 15 season and then also 13 where the Pirates were really good, you haven't had teams from the National League Central that you're going, oh, that's a World Series contender. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. The World Series contenders have come from the East and the West. Yeah. And more often than not, it's been the Dodgers out of the West, although at the beginning of that, it was a lot of the Giants. And then here recently, the Phillies and the Braves.
And my passion is also because, like, I feel like death right now, so I'm also getting a little bit more. So
you sound ghastly.
I just expect more. Like, I just don't like basically flatlining in the playoffs. Cardinals are model of consistency. I get that. I'm sick of hearing that, and I'm sick of, kind of having all these free agent opportunities out there, and then we hype up a guy in his 4th season trying to hit over 220, or hyping up prospects who probably won't be in the league for another 2 years. We just justify not signing players by just giving, half-ass excuses, and then we go into the playoffs and absolutely look lost. Taking out Quintana, like all this, it's just Cardinal baseball for me, what I remember in the last 8 to 10 years. And I love Cardinal baseball, but the business model had changed, and I don't think Mozeliak in the front office has changed with baseball. And I could be wrong on that, but it just seems to be that way. I think you got to be a little bit more aggressive. I think you got to take chances. And, I mean, they don't really hold each other accountable at all. They just kind of go, oh, well, we almost made the playoffs, or we made the playoffs. A couple things could have been different. So, I don't know. I think Mozeliak's personality, and I don't think he's with the times. Oh. I'm just saying I think baseball is, I wouldn't say passing him by, but I don't think they're changing their business model and strategy as much as they should from the last 10 years.
The last couple of years, they've had a lot of success making moves at the deadline.
Yes, they have.
Getting quality pitchers that made a real difference.
2 huge moves at the deadline. Cannot deny that one bit, Doug.
Yeah.
Wish they would have signed Quintana. That's another one of those offseason just question mark.
Yeah.
Just why. But, yeah, I agree. Their trades in the past couple of seasons at the deadline have been really good.
Plus, let me ask you, what has changed in baseball that the Cardinals haven't changed with?
I think you need to spend money, and I realize I'm not talking $17 million for a Yadier Molina reunion tour, or $10-12 million for Wainwright's 50th birthday party. Like I think we need to allocate money elsewhere. And we've had a huge need, Iggy, for outfield, a cornerstone outfielder instead of Grichuk, Piscotty, and Fowler. You could name all these revolving door outfielders. we just have had an opportunity to sign one of those. An infielder, Tommy Edman can move to second. There's not a lot of shorts. I mean, you just got Paul DeYoung. You don't have a lot of depth there. And now you're bringing up Mason Wynn, who won't be on the roster until 2026. So, I think there were moves that should have been made, and they just decided to, again, hold those prospects up on a pedestal and try to justify not spending the money and having second-rate players in the outfield like Yepez and Nootbaar. No offense to those guys, but they're not cornerstones. So that would be where I think a change should have been implemented to be spending more money.
That's not. Baseball is changing, and Mosaic hasn't changed with
Well,
baseball.
you also don't take your pitcher out with 6 2/3 innings with no hit or one-hit baseball either. I think they talked themselves into making stupid decisions or not making decisions at all.
Again, those are
we have
moves.
the best fans in baseball in St. Louis.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it is.
Again,
awesome.
those are moves the Cardinals have made, but it's not how baseball has changed, and Mosaic hasn't changed with baseball.
But they're analytic whores, and I think that gets in the way.
Analytic.
Well, a lot of teams have gone that route.
Well, I think a lot of teams have also realized that, going above and beyond with the StatCast and all that can get in your way. Lars Nootbaar spent his entire offseason closing his eyes and swinging blindly to get a 109-mile-an-hour swing, which in the end doesn't make any sense if you're popping him straight up or striking out. So I don't know. I just can't get behind what they're selling. It's a decent team. Don't get me wrong. They're not butt-asses ever, which we should all appreciate.
Yeah.
But, going to the game and watching that.
We get spoiled.
No.
I mean, if they ever had a horrible season, we'd blow up completely, wouldn't we?
We'd be crestfallen for sure.
We would be. We just assume that they're in the playoffs.
But what I think is interesting, and we got it's more of a kind of a podcast discussion or a discussion where we have a full hour, is the Blues are in the midst of what can only be described as an incredibly disappointing season. Would you agree with that, Doug?
Oh, yeah.
And yet I feel like, and maybe I'm off the mark, if we were to do more of a scientific one than me just tweeting it out to, my followers, which are certainly not representative of St. Louis sports fans. But like if Randy Carricker sent it out and then I sent it out, and you kind of got that two different audiences' mindsets, I would think the Blues have a higher approval rating than the Cardinals, which sounds asinine on the surface. But I think that, and I think again, this is all thesis. This isn't backed up with any data, but I think that's because fans of the Blues, who are also fans of the Cardinals, and fans of the Cardinals who are also fans of the Blues, believe that the Blues are always trying to win. Whether they are or not, they always believe they're trying to win. And they want the Blues to get a playoff series because, it'll help Mr. Stillman to have that revenue. Nobody goes, it'll help Mr. DeWitt to get those 2 games. You know what I mean?
No.
And it's just a different mindset. And a lot of that, I swear to you that I think there's something to this. A lot of it is as simple as the way John Mozeliak comes off to the fans.
Yeah. Comes off as an intellectual, a little smarter than everybody else.
And that they're being talked down to, and especially in a market that doesn't necessarily have, isn't littered with Fortune 500 companies, and, it isn't necessarily well received here.
Maybe the same reason Whitey Herzog was so wildly popular.
And I was about to go into up until he won the pennant. Once he won the pennant, that's when it changed. It wasn't 2006, it was 2004. Tony La Russa was on the outside looking in.
Yeah.
And it was, he doesn't eat meat, he drinks wine, I don't understand why his family doesn't live with, all these things.
Probably doesn't fish.
And so it goes into that. Now, it's not that Doug Armstrong's, this man of the people thing, but there is a belief more that they are more #relatable. And on top of it, that they will do, and they will spend the cap, even if they're perceived as being a lower budget team, to try to win. Now, it's not fair because 4 years ago they won a Stanley Cup, and it absolutely unified this region, including people who probably hadn't watched a hockey game up until they played the Dallas Stars in the second round. And that was only 4 years ago. The Cardinal World Series is now at this point, more than a decade ago. But it's something, and for example, when the Juan Soto thing came up, Jackson and I were talking about it on 101, and people were like, how dare you even talk about the Cardinals going and get Juan Soto as if it was like this asinine. I'm going, why? And why shouldn't we talk about a team that's been as successful and a fan base that supports him as much going and getting Juan Soto as if we're like out of line for talking about something like that, which works to the Cardinals' advantage because not everybody in the fan base, but a healthy portion of the fan base doesn't expect them to go out and do that, and so therefore the standards are lower. Meanwhile, the Blues are dealing with the salary cap, and people are going, "Why didn't they get Matthew Tkachuk in here?" You know. Well, doesn't he want to come and play here? And the real answer is, I'd kind of rather be in South Florida. But even if he didn't want to be in South Florida, it still was a salary cap situation. Now, the Cardinals don't have to deal with that. But with that said, there's an expectation that they would go out and sign this prized potential free agent before he was traded from the Flames to the Panthers. And it's so weird to me that the team that is blue blood is not held to the standard that the team, no pun intended, is absolutely not in the Blues. But for whatever reason, that's the current standard. That when Bryce Harper's out there and you have an outfield need, there wasn't really a serious conversation amongst fans about Bryce Harper. There was a portion of the fan base, and when Juan Soto was out there, and initially it wasn't credible. Jackson and I were talking about it on 101, but it's like, oh, God, those morons are talking about Juan Soto. And then it became real, but it's like, well, the Cardinals can't possibly do that. Well, why not? Do you want to win? Because that's the thing. Or you just want to get in. And the thing is, when they just got in 2006 and 2011, they won the World Series. And when they had their best teams, 2004 and 2013, they got to the World Series, but they didn't win. And so I think it has created this false premise of just get in, and it's like the NCAA tournament. And what we found is since they haven't won an NLCS game since 2014, that's actually not the case anymore in baseball. Your thoughts are